Hello, welcome to today's webcast entitled Roles and Functions of Queensland Integrity Agencies in Local Government. My name is Paxton Booth and I'll be your moderator today. Today's webcast is being recorded, and in the unlikely event that technical issues arise, it will be available to view later today using the same link which you accessed this webinar. Now, before we get started, I'd like to point out some of the interactive features on the webcast player you are watching right now. On the screen below, next to the timeline, you'll notice a speech bubble. That's the Ask a Question button. If you'd like to pose a question or comment at any time during the webcast, just click on the speech bubble, fill out the form, then click Send. We'll take your questions at the end of today's presentations. I encourage you to provide your name and email address along with your question or comment. That way, if we don't get to your question during the webcast, we can follow up afterwards. For any technical assistance, please email support@qld.gov.tv.com.au. Now, our first presenter this morning is Dr. Nikola Stepanov, the Queensland Integrity Commissioner. We'll be followed by Mr. MacSporran, Chairperson of the Crime and Corruption Commission, and then Kathleen Florian, the Independent Assessor. I'll hand over now to Nikola.
Thank you very much, Paxton, and good morning and congratulations on your election as local councillors. Welcome to our webinar today. As Paxton said, my name's Nikola Stepanov and I'm the Queensland Integrity Commissioner. So part of my role is to assist those who have been elected as councillors, and also to State Parliament to make good decisions that are in the public interest. I'm a statutory office holder and I'm an Officer of Parliament, so I'm not employed by government, and my reporting relationship is to the Speaker of the House and the Parliamentary Economics and Governance Committee. This allows for me to be impartial and independent, and you'll see that a lot with the other integrity agencies. I'm also the convener and chair of what's known as the Integrity Committee, and this includes the heads of all the agencies that you can see on the screen now, and our meeting notes are available on our website if you're interested. So I only have 4 functions under the Integrity Act. 2 relate to providing advice. I also maintain the lobbyist register, and I'm also responsible for raising public awareness about ethics and integrity issues. As well, I can be asked by the Premier to set standards. We're only a very, very tiny office, so I'm only supported by 4 staff, and it's an awful lot of business that we do. And in general, that can impact sometimes on our turnaround times for our advisors. So more than 5,000 people fall under the Integrity Act in terms of our advice function. So it includes the Premier, the Deputy Premier, the Ministers, Assistant Ministers and all other Members of Parliament. It also includes all of the statutory office holders. So you might be interested to know that there are more than 300 different government boards and bodies. As well, I provide advice to all the different commissioners and ombudsmans. Under my advice function, it includes all of the ministerial staff who advise ministers, all Directors General and Director General's equivalent, all Chief Executives, it's a very long list, all Senior Executives, Senior Officers, Senior Officer equivalents. As well, the ministers are able to nominate extra people or extra classes of persons. And this can include things like maritime pilots, the trade commissioners, extra staff within different departments, and more recently it included mayors and councillors. So if we're thinking about the ethics and advice functions of my Act, I don't provide legal advice, but I must have regard for any relevant legislation, standard or code. We have really strict secrecy provisions within our Act, and any advice I provide to someone who seeks it is non-binding. So that is, you can seek my advice, but you're not obliged to take my advice and put it into effect. However, I do recommend that you do so. There's also no right of reply for me under the Act, so I'm not able to reveal who may or may not have sought advice or what that advice might have been. Of course, any advice I provide to those who seek it must be in the public interest, so it's not in the interest of the person that's seeking the advice, and it's not uncommon that it will carry some kind of detriment to the advisee. And an example would be where they would have to sell shares, or they may have to change jobs, or they may have to step down from a role, for example, if they're a director of a company. As well, I frequently liaise with all of the other agencies, and in the local government sector that includes the Office of the Independent Assessor and the Crime and Corruption Commission. Having a look at our dashboard now, so the previous commissioners, of which I'm number 5, usually would do about 60 advices per year. last year I received more than 394 inquiries. Again this year we're looking at a very big year, well over 200 inquiries. We've got a really growing profile in terms of the prevention space, and we do a lot of interactive education sessions, including webinars just like this, so you'd hope that I don't get tongue-tied too often because I should be used to this kind of thing. In part, this huge increase in the demand in my office is because of the heightened expectations of the public on elected officials and also senior public servants. So it's really good to see them respond by getting in and seeking advice. This is our dashboard, so it gives you a bit of a breakdown of who seeks my advice. So as you can see, at the moment about 35% of my requests are coming from the local government space, and around 30% are from members of the Legislative Assembly. As we get closer to the state election, the members of the Legislative Assembly will take up a much larger proportion of that advice. As well, you can see there that I do a lot of work with Chief Executives and Directors General and also statutory office holders. In terms of our turnaround time, as I said before, for those seeking advice, we do have a tiny office and I'm unable to delegate the advice function, so the advice is from me. So the response times vary and I prioritise any advices according to the public interest. So in general, those where there's a great public interest at stake, I will turn around on that day or within one working day. However, it can take longer than 10 days for me to be able to meet some of the advice requests that I receive, and in general it might also take up to 2 to 3 weeks, particularly for local government where you already have a lot of fantastic resources available to you. So the main areas of concern that I provide advice around about conflicts of interest, so that takes up about 80% of my workload. Of that, about 20% are what we call duty-on-duty conflicts, so this is where you might have competing duties. An example would be if you as a councillor are also the director of your own private company, and some of your obligations as a director will compete with your duties as a councillor. So that's what we call a duty-on-duty conflict. I also get asked a lot about statutory reporting obligations. For example, in the local government space, that might be about your obligations to report a suspicion or belief of a conflict of interest that involves another councillor. I also get lots of requests about the acceptance of service, gifts and hospitality, and also we do a lot of work in the post-separation obligations space. Those first three that I mentioned, of course, are all leading corruption risk factors, so that's something important to keep in mind. What we do find though is that it's entirely natural for whether you're in local government or state government or a senior public servant to have a conflict of interest occasionally, and this is because we all have people in our lives that we like or love, and we all have things that we own or memberships to particular committees, especially those community organisations. So we're trying to move away from this idea that having a conflict of interest is a negative thing. It's not. It's completely normal. What we are finding is that interest issues are becoming more and more complex, and it's really important to have the transparency around discussing the kind of interest that you have and seeking advice, including from other councillors, about how to manage that. In general, conflicts of interest for statutory office holders and people like local councillors and ministers is an underexplored area of research, so we contribute to that space and you'll find a lot of our publications on our website. A little bit of a warning though, we do have some very long, lengthy research papers. If you are prone to insomnia, they're a good way to help you get some extra sleep. So our resources are developed in conjunction with our partners, including in the local government space with the Office of the Independent Assessor and the Crime and Corruption Commission. As well, I'd like to acknowledge Crown Law as well for their review of a lot of our resources. So the nominations of mayors and councillors is fairly recent under the Integrity Act. So Minister Hinchcliffe, in response to the Balcara report, recommendation 28A, nominated mayors and councillors on February 5 of 2018. Previously, mayors and councillors didn't fall under my Act, and chief executives of local governments still do not fall under my Act. But we have had you now for a little bit over 2 years, and it's been wonderful to be involved with you. So if you are seeking my advice as a mayor or a councillor, you must make your request in writing, for example an email. So that's a statutory obligation, requirement that I have. I do have a lot of people trying to make contact with me via the phone. and not sending in written requests, and unfortunately I can't provide advice under those circumstances. I may ask you for more information as well once you've emailed me, just to make sure that I am aware of the full facts. And of course there are legal protections available to you if you provide me with all of the information about a conflict of interest, and I provide advice back to you and you put that advice into effect. However, it's important that I point out that if you are under investigation of any kind, including whether it's by the Crime and Corruption Commission or the Office of the Independent Assessor, it's not appropriate for you to seek my advice, and that's because we don't want to be to sort of sway the assessment or investigative process. So for mayors and councillors, you're very, very lucky in that you have a huge amount of resources available to you. So the local government department has resources available on its webpage, so does the Office of the Independent Assessor, the Crime and Corruption Commission, and also the Electoral Commission, as well as the resources that we have available on our web pages. So I would suggest that you familiarise yourself with all of those resources. Often the answers to your questions can be found in those resources. So as a first step, if you're unsure, have a look at all of the resources available to you. And you can also contact the local government department staff that are in all regional areas as well. Any other uncertainties, remember that you have the Local Government Association of Queensland, and they've got quite considerable resources on their webpage, and they also have the ability to assist you to get independent legal advice. On a final note, I always have to mention lobbying. So as I said, we regulate lobbying in Queensland and also maintain the register. Your Chief Executive will keep a record of any lobbying that occurs within your council, and if you are uncertain at any stage, if you might be being lobbied by a party and you're really not sure if they're registered or not, or if they're required to be, make sure you refer that to your Chief Executive, and they can contact our office, or they can have a look on our lobbyist register, which is publicly available. Each year I also audit the councils to make sure that they have complied with their obligations in regard to lobbying, so it's not uncommon for us to touch base on those kinds of issues. So on that note, I would just like to say once again, a huge congratulations on your election success, and welcome to local government, and I look forward to meeting with you all over the next coming few years. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikola. That was great to hear about the roles and services that your office provides. I'm sure that a lot of councils out there will probably take you up on some of the services you provide.